Kia ora, Year 11 students, it's Ms Mac. I'm just going to, as promised, go over the 2015 exam for you. I'm actually only really going to try and spend lots of time on question 4, which is about an indirect tax. So if you've got any particular questions about that I don't cover, then you can come see me on Monday or ask one of your teachers tomorrow, Mr Taro or Mr Moore. So just on the first question, it's the same like every year. The only difference here is whether you have a shortage or a surplus. So practice it hard and try and really do really well in this question to set yourself up to, do well on the paper, or just, have a bit of breathing space. So on to the next question, which is a change in, well, it says non-price factor. So it doesn't actually tell you, it says would affect the market demand, so it does tell you it's demand. So you're supposed to read this about fizzy drinks being bad for you, basically, and work out what's going to happen to demand. And it's going to decrease. So you can check this out in the answers. If you don't know how to find the answers, please ask your teacher to show you, or just come ask me on Monday, although I think that's a bit late. Ask them now. But what I just point out to you is have a look at the answers in terms of graph labeling for both questions in terms of what they're wanting, and use it as a guideline. And yeah, just don't forget D1. You could probably get away with at least drawing another line and inside, shifting inwards, and an arrow. But D to D1 is good. I'd include an arrow and then showing the quantity decreasing and the price decreasing. So just my tips for this question here is in the explanation that they're requiring, fully explain the effect of market demand. You do actually need to say why it decreases. So I would be talking about a change in tastes and preferences in the market, that the consumers are likely to be put off drinking fizzy drinks by this information, and will prefer to drink other types of drinks instead of fizzy drinks, healthier drinks. You may just have some opinions that they probably don't really care, but that's not what we're asking you. We're just saying to you, okay, theoretically this is released, and it's the idea that it would affect consumers' tastes and preferences in the market, and it would make them less inclined, or they don't prefer fizzy drinks anymore, so the demand will decrease. So just make sure you explain that here. Don't just say demand decreases. You actually need a little bit of an explanation as to why. This bit about the change in the equilibrium price and quantity, at an achieved level, you're just going to say that they both decrease, and you might refer to the graph. What we're actually looking for is the idea that when you have a decrease in demand, and you can see it here, you can also see the answers here as well, that the price doesn't automatically fall, that we have this process whereby if the price stayed at PE, you would have a surplus, because quantity demand would be here, but QS would still be stuck here. So the price needs to fall to clear that surplus. All right, so it's bid down, or like producers of fizzy drinks have a sale to clear stock. So that's what we're looking for there, and you can see that in the answer. And then the last bit about the revenue is just the idea that it falls. That's kind of, I think, obvious, like you can probably get that one. Just make sure that you refer to the change in price and quantity, that the price is going to fall and the quantity they're going to sell is going to fall, so therefore they're going to have a fall in revenue. So it's just using the data, the model, to support what you're saying there. All right. In terms of the marking schedule, I feel that it's not too difficult to understand what they're requiring each level. But if you do have any questions about that, please feel free to come and ask your teachers to just maybe go through it with you and explain. So going to the next question, it's a price control. So this year there were 4 questions. This was before they've changed it to 3. So the third question was about a maximum price in this case. So again, just look at the graph in terms of what they were wanting you to label it. Some of you just miss out little things, and so it's just about, dotting your I's and that sort of thing, crossing your T's. But just follow the instructions carefully and make sure you do everything they say. Of course, you do need to know if it's a shortage or surplus, but maximum price is below equilibrium. Below equilibrium, you have a shortage. So in terms of the writing here, what they're looking for, the relationships, an economic relationship, sometimes they say that economic relationship, they're substitutes, people. You do actually need to say that. Don't say complements. They don't go with each other. I don't think you'd get bottled water and then mix it with fizzy drinks. That's just weird. No, they can be used instead of each other. They
they can be used in place of each other. So we're looking for you to say, oh, they're substitutes, and the idea of why they can be substitutes, because people if they're thirsty, would drink bottled water or fizzy drinks. They can be used in place of each other. And the change in price in this case, actually, this is the idea that it's a maximum price. So normally when you have a shortage, the price would be bid up, but this can't happen in this market because it's a legal price set by the government, and so that must be the maximum that consumers will pay. It could go down, but it can't go up. The change in quantity demand, that's really basically the price has gone down, quantity demand has gone up, and why, and refer to the numbers in the graph. All right, you have actual numbers, so refer to them. The change in consumer spending is a little bit of like thinking here. If you can go back to the model and have a look here, although the quantity demanded has increased to 8 million bottles, and the quantity supplied has dropped to 2 million bottles, and we have a shortage, it's a permanent shortage, the actual amount that will be sold in this market is 2 million. You might want 8 million bottles of fizzy drink consumers, but you can only have 2 million bottles. Therefore, their spending goes down from $3 times $4, $3 times 4 million, which is 12, I don't know, lots, 12 million, thousand, whatever the answers have it. And then it goes down to $2 times 2 million, which is 4 million. Yeah, it is 4 million. I don't know why I was questioning that. Okay, so 4 million from 12 million, and therefore you've got a decrease of $8 million spending. Flow-on effects, I think most people do really well with it. Black market's quite popular. So price controls do develop black markets, permanent ones. Just make sure you explain what you mean, like what is a black market, why would a black market develop. If any of these other ones, there's the rationing one, but it doesn't say it here, but actually maybe producers might let some of their workers go, like because they're not producing as many fizzy drinks, so they don't need as many. They're also trying to reduce costs and maybe retain profit margins. So the difference is they let go staff. That's just saying why they're going to let go staff, referring to costs, not needing them, the change in revenue, the price, that type of thing, is explaining. So you can have a look at these flow-on effects and they're just giving you an idea of what you could have said. Make sure you state rationing might happen and then explain what you mean by that, or whatever else you choose. So on to the big question here, and I just want to spend a bit of time on it. And that is the tax. So 2015 they did a tax, and they did like actual numbers and stuff, so I think it's quite a good question. I don't like the 2016 one. 2017 is a subsidy, so if you want to practice your taxes and subsidies, 2015, 2017, good papers to test yourself on. So this is the answers, so let's get back to the question. That's not the question, this is the question. So going back, all right. Bit of information usually will be something here, and basically it's going to help reduce obesity. Obesity is not a good thing, so it's 50 cents, going to save lives. So this sort of sounds like a demerit good. Fizzy drinks must be considered bad for you, so therefore we're going to tax them to try and reduce consumption. So 50 cents. Now, I'll just point out to you here, some of you really do struggle a little bit with this. Do try your workbook for practicing applying the tax. So first thing is to apply the tax, which is to decrease the supplier curve by the amount of the tax. So what we're saying is previously at 50 cents, the producers in this market would have supplied 2 million cans of fizzy drink. The thing is now, they had to pay 50 cents to the government. So actually at 50 cents they wouldn't supply anything because they'd make no profit whatsoever. So if they're going to supply 2 million cans, they'd have to pay, get $1, because then 50 cents go to the government and they still keep 50 cents for themselves. All right. If we were to move to, say, 3 million cans, they would have wanted $1 before, but now to still get $1, they'd have to charge $1.50 because 50 cents has to go to the government. So all you're doing is you're shifting the supply curve inwards, all right, to the left by 50 cents. So $1.50, 4 million would now have to be supplied at $2. 5 million would have to be supplied at $2.50. So I'm just going straight up and I'm adding on 50 cents to the price at each combination, and then I'm going to draw a line through my dots, okay, And now in the answers, I don't like it. It's called S1. Disagree. That's an incorrect labelling. Thank you. Whoever wrote this assessment schedule, got to be careful. I feel it should be called S-tax. And here's the reason why. This supply curve here, which is the original, so it's what you have here, this has not changed. There's been no change in cost for this firm. Sometimes they say a tax is like a cost of production. Disagree. It's not. Cost of productions are things like wages, I don't know, petrol, electricity, raw materials. There's nothing about that in this question, right? There's no text saying to you that their costs have changed. The only thing that's changed that they have to pay 50 cents to the government. So you leave this as S, and then I would call it S plus tax, because this plus the 50 cents equals S plus tax. All right, and it is important because it helps you to find the producer price and see the difference between the price the consumers pay and the producers receive. So that's just my little tip. Call it S plus tax. I actually think that if you check the marking schedules, they do require you to call it S plus tax. I think in the last year or so they've tightened up on that. So just checking the time, we've got 10 minutes, we've got 5 minutes left, so we're not going over. So just go in terms of what you have to do here. For an achieve, they wanted you to get the model, put in the new equilibrium price and quantity P1 Q1. Please make sure you follow instructions. So if you whack in the new supplier curve and it's correct, so that distance is exactly 50 cents, you're going to get a new price of $2.75. Sometimes you might find it a bit hard to tell what the new value is. I think that's pretty clear. It's halfway between $3 and $2.50, so that's $2.75. Might allow, you know, if they're making a little bit of leeway. I think you can see that here. So after the tax, they've got $2.80, so they're sort of saying it could be read as $2.80. So don't panic. If you think it's $2.80, you'll get away with that. It's probably not $2.90 though, all right, or $2.60. So $2.75 or $2.80 is what we're looking for there. Then that was what they asked you to label it. They have not asked you to label the producer price, but in section B they ask for it. So they say the consumers pay before and after. All right, so we've got that, and then the price sellers receive or producers receive before and after. So this is really like, I do think you have to kind of understand this it's a bit harder. So it's the idea that consumers pay, you know, where supply equals, supply plus tax equals the demand curve. So the demand curve at that point, what is the price that they would pay? So it's $2.75 or $2.80. If you read that, and then you've got to say, okay, well, what's the price that producers would need to receive to supply the new quantity of 5.5 million? To find out the price that they would need to receive to supply 5.5, we have to read off their supply curve, which is this one here. It's not changed. So off that supply curve, you can see that where 5.5 million intersects the supply curve, and draw a line, straight one, over to the price axis using a ruler. All right, that is about halfway, so that's 225. And at this point, you'd know that you've correctly shown the tax, because the difference between 275 and 225 is 50 cents, which is the amount of the tax. And that's why sometimes you see like a bracket here, P1 minus PP is the 50 cents tax, the tax per unit. Okay, and then what you can actually do is you can shade in that rectangle, P1 down to PP, and over to the new quantity Q1, and that's the amount of government revenue. Sometimes they ask you to do that, not overly often, but it might be helpful because you're going to have to calculate the government revenue in B. All right, so that's just a little tip from me. Alrighty, so just looking at B, if you did B in the graph, then you would have actually got an A4. You can see that here. They don't actually require you to do any explaining, like any writing. So I don't know if that makes you feel happy or not. But you are, like for A4, you would have to get everything correct here. You might as well do some writing if you've done that, because the writing is just explaining what you've calculated. So for merit, you know, it's saying here on page, I think it's 10. Yeah, so the change in price to consumers and the effect on consumer spending. Well, the change in price is that it's gone up to 275 from 250. Or you can say 280, and that's because the producers are passing on. So we say they're making them pay part of the tax, part of that 50 cents. They're actually making them pay 25 cents or half of the tax to the government. So they don't pay it directly to the government, but they are increasing the price by 25 cents to cover part of that tax. And then that means that consumers, you do have to read the graph and do your maths here in terms of before and after. If you do your calculations, so you've got it here, they've got 6,000 before and now 5.5 after, so the quantities decreased by 500,000 cans. But the price has gone up by 250 to 275. And if you do your calculations, get a calculator, all right? Don't try and be a genius. Then the change in spending is going to be increased. They're going to spend more because they're paying more relative to the drop in quantity. Their price has gone up more than the quantity. All right, and then just the sellers, it's the same thing as before. Their revenue is going to go down, but they're paying part of the tax to the government, so their price goes down. And then